A friend of mine, a writer, a smart guy, not the type to spook easily, said it to me half as a joke. "You'll love this. Since I saw you last, I found a haunted house, right in the middle of London." "Actually haunted?" I said. "By what? Ghosts?" "I honestly can't tell you. Here's what I know. 6 weeks ago, my wife and I were flat hunting. We're walking down this quiet street, and there's a sign in a window. Furnished rooms to let. Nice spot. We go in. We like it. We take it by the week." He paused. "We left on the 3rd day. There was nothing on earth that would have made my wife stay a 4th night. And honestly, I don't blame her. What did you see? That's the thing. I don't want to be laughed at. And I can't ask you to just believe something you'd think was insane without seeing it yourself. So I'll only say this. It wasn't really what we saw or heard. You could always tell yourself that was nerves, imagination, some trick. It was a feeling. There was one room, an empty one, and every time we passed its door, this cold, nameless terror came over both of us, and we never saw or heard a single thing in that room. That was the worst part. He told me the woman who ran the place had said something to him on the way out. He told her the rooms didn't suit them, they'd be going early, and she'd said, flat and dry, "I know why. You've lasted longer than most. Hardly anyone makes it a second night. Nobody before you made it 3. But I suppose they've been kind to you." "They? Who?" he'd asked, trying to smile. "Why, the ones who haunt the house. Whoever they are. I don't mind them. I've known them for years, since I lived here myself, back when I wasn't the help. They'll be the death of me one day. I don't care. I'm old. I'll die soon enough. And then I'll be with them, and still in this house." He said she was so calm about it that it stopped him cold. He paid for the week and got out. "You've got me," I told him. "There's nothing I'd like more than a night in a haunted house. Give me the address." He did. And when we split up, I walked straight there. It was on the north side of Oxford Street, a dull, respectable stretch. The house was shut up tight. No sign in the window now. No answer when I knocked. I was turning to go when a kid collecting empty beer mugs from the basement doors nearby called over to me. "You looking for someone at that house?" I heard it was for rent. "For rent?" He laughed. "The woman who kept it's dead. 3 weeks now. Nobody'll stay there. Mister. Jared offered my mom £1 a week just to open and shut the windows, and she wouldn't do it." "Wouldn't? Why not?" "'Cause it's haunted. The old woman who kept it. They found her dead in her bed, eyes wide open. They say the devil strangled her." I asked where I could find this Mr. Jarrett. The kid pointed me to a street close by, and I gave him something for his trouble and went. Jarrett was home. An older guy, sharp-eyed, well-mannered. I told him straight out who I was and what I wanted, that I'd heard the house was haunted, that I badly wanted to spend a night in it, and that I'd pay whatever he asked. "The house is yours," he said. "For as long as you like. Forget rent. You'd be doing me the favor if you could figure out what's wrong with it. I can't rent it. I can't even get someone to clean it or answer the door. It's haunted by day as much as by night. Though at night, things get worse. Sometimes a lot worse." He told me the history. The old woman who'd just died there had been someone his family knew, fallen on hard times. He'd taken her out of the workhouse because, years and years ago, she'd actually rented that same house herself, back when she had money. She was educated, tough-minded, the only person he'd ever gotten to stay in the place. And now she was dead. Sudden. Found in her bed with her eyes open. How long's it had this reputation? I asked. Longer than I can tell you. That old woman said it was already haunted when she first rented it, 30-odd years back. I spent most of my life abroad. I only inherited the place last year. I laughed at the stories. Spent good money fixing it up. Put in some new furniture. Advertised it. Got a tenant, a retired officer, family, a few staff. They all walked out the next morning. Every one of them had seen something different, but every one of them was equally terrified. I couldn't even bring myself to sue him. He looked at me. You'll see or hear something. I can't tell you what. It's never the same twice. Bring whatever you want. Take whatever precautions you like. But I'll be honest with you, because you've been honest with me. Unless you're seriously determined, and unless your nerves are unusually solid, don't do this. My nerves have been through a lot, I said. I'll take my chances. He got the keys out of a drawer and handed them over. I thanked him and left with my prize. The second I got home, I called in the one person I trusted for this. A young guy who worked for me named Frank. Cheerful, fearless, not a superstitious bone in his body. Frank, I said, remember that castle in Germany? The one that was supposed to have a headless ghost, and we sat up all night and got nothing? Well, I found a house here in London that I'm told is genuinely haunted. I'm sleeping there tonight. From everything I've heard, something's going to show itself, and it might be bad. If I bring you along, can I count on you to keep your head, whatever happens? God, yes, Frank said, grinning. Trust me. Good. Here are the keys. Here's the address. Go over now. Pick us a bedroom. The place has been empty for weeks, so get a fire going. Air out the bed. Make sure there are candles and firewood. Take my revolver and my knife. Arm yourself too. And if the two of us can't handle a few ghosts, then we're a sorry pair. I had work the rest of the day, enough that I barely thought about what I'd signed up for. I ate alone, late, reading while I ate, the way I always do. Something dry and solid and full of ordinary daylight sense. An antidote, I figured, to whatever the night had planned. Around 9:30, I put the book in my pocket and walked over. And I took my dog, a bull terrier. Sharp, brave, a great ratter, the kind of dog that loves nosing into dark corners. If anything alive was hiding in that house, he'd find it. It was a summer night, but cold. The sky was low and gray. There was a moon, thin, sickly, but a moon. I knocked, and Frank opened the door with a big smile. All set, sir. Nice and cozy. Oh, I said, a little let down. Nothing strange then? Nothing at all? Well, now that you mention it, I did hear something odd. What? Feet pattering along behind me, and once or twice this little whispering sound, right at my ear. That's all. Not scared? Me? Not a bit. And the look on his face told me, whatever happened tonight, this guy would not run. We stood in the front hall, the street door shut behind us, and right away, My attention went to the dog. He'd charged in eager enough, but now he'd slunk back to the door and was scratching and whining to get out. I patted him, talked to him, calmed him down, and he settled. But he stayed glued to my heels the whole way through the house, which was not like him. Usually he ran ahead into anywhere new, not tonight. We searched the whole place, top to bottom, the basement, kitchen, and cellars first. A couple of ancient bottles of wine gone thick with cobwebs, clearly untouched for years. So the ghosts weren't drinkers. Nothing else down there. Just a gloomy little backyard with very high walls, the stones damp, a film of grime over everything. And that's where I saw the first thing. We were crossing the yard, our feet leaving faint prints in the grime, and right in front of me, in the open, I watched a footprint form itself, out of nothing, pressed down into the dirt on its own. I grabbed Frank's arm and pointed, and ahead of that print, another one dropped, then another. We both saw it. I rushed forward, and the prints kept forming just ahead of me, one after another. Small ones, a child's. Too faint to see clearly, but it looked like a bare foot. They led all the way to the far wall, and then they stopped and didn't come back. We went back up and searched the ground floor. Dining room, back parlor, a little third room. Dead silent, all of it. Then the front room upstairs, fresher, newer. I sat down in an armchair. Frank set the candlestick on the table and I told him to shut the door. As he turned to do it, a chair on the far side of the room slid out from the wall. Quietly, smoothly, no one near it. It crossed the floor and stopped about a yard from mine, facing me, like someone had just sat down across from me. "Well," I said with a little laugh, "this beats a magic show." And the dog threw his head back and howled. Frank hadn't seen the chair move. He was busy trying to quiet the dog. I sat there staring at the chair, and I swear I saw something on it. A pale blue outline, hazy, the shape of a person, so faint I couldn't trust my own eyes. "Put that chair back," I told Frank, "against the wall." He did. Then he spun around. "Was that you, sir?" "What?" Something hit me, hard, on the shoulder right here. "No," I said. "But we've got company tonight, and even if we can't catch their tricks, we'll catch them before they scare us." We didn't stay long in those rooms. They were freezing, damp. So we went up to the bedroom Frank had picked, where the fire was going. A good big room, 2 windows onto the street, a 4-poster bed facing the fire. A door in the left wall connected to a small side room where Frank would sleep. A room with only that one door, no other way in or out except through mine. We checked everything. 2 cupboards by the fireplace, papered over to match the walls. Empty, just hooks. Solid outer walls, no hidden doors. Then, out on the landing, there was one more door, shut tight. "Sir," Frank said, surprised, "I unlocked this one with all the rest when I got here. It can't have locked itself from the inside because..." And before he finished, the door, with neither of us touching it, swung quietly open on its own. We looked at each other. Same thought hit us both. Someone's in there. I went in first, Frank behind me. Small, bare, dead room. A few empty boxes in a corner. One window, shutters closed. No fireplace. No other door but the one we'd come through. No carpet, Just an old worm-eaten floor, patched here and there. And nobody. Nowhere for anybody to hide. And while we stood there staring around, the door we'd come through swung shut. On its own. Just like it had opened. We were locked in. That was the first time real fear crawled up my spine. Not Frank, though. They think they've trapped us, he scoffed. I could kick that door down. Try the handle first, I said, shaking it off. I'll check the window. I got the shutters open. It looked down onto that backyard. A sheer drop. Nothing to climb down to. No ledge. Anyone going out that window would just fall to the stones below. Frank couldn't open the door. He asked if he could force it, and I told him to go ahead. And I'll say this for him. Through all of it, he never once lost his nerve. But he was a strong guy, and the door didn't even shake. He kicked it with everything he had. Nothing. Then I tried. Nothing. And as I gave up, that cold horror came over me again. Worse this time. Colder. Heavier. Like something was seeping up out of the cracks in that old floor, filling the air. Something poisonous. Something that hated the fact that I was alive. And then the door, slowly, quietly, opened again. On its own. We shot out onto the landing. And we both saw it. A large pale light, about the size of a person but shapeless, drifting ahead of us, up the stairs toward the attics. I followed it. Frank followed me. It floated into a little garret room, its door open, and I stepped in right behind it. And the light shrank down into a single tiny brilliant globe, hung over a bed in the corner for a second, trembled, and vanished. We went to the bed. On a chest of drawers next to it lay an old faded silk scarf, a needle still stuck in a half-mended tear, everything thick with dust. Probably the dead woman's room. I opened the drawers. A few scraps of women's clothing, and 2 letters, tied together with a strip of yellowed ribbon. I took them. Nothing else there. The light didn't come back. But as we turned to leave, we both heard it clearly. Soft footsteps, pattering along the floor just ahead of us. We went through the other attic rooms, 4 in all, and the footsteps went ahead of us the whole way. Never anything to see. Only the sound. I had the letters in my hand. And as I started down the stairs, I felt it, distinctly. A hand close around my wrist. A soft, faint tug, trying to pull the letters out of my grip. I just held on tighter, and the pulling stopped. Back in the bedroom, I noticed the dog hadn't followed us. He was jammed up against the fire, shaking. While Frank got out the weapons and laid them on the table by my bed, I sat down to read the letters. They were dated 35 years ago. They were love letters, from a man to a woman, a husband to a young wife, it seemed. The writer had been a sailor. He mentioned a voyage. Rough spelling, rough hand, but the feeling in them was strong. A wild, rough kind of love. And running underneath it, in little dark hints, was something else. Something that felt like crime. One line I still remember. We ought to love each other, because think how everyone would curse us if it all came out. And don't let anyone be in the room with you at night. You talk in your sleep. And what's done can't be undone. And I'm telling you, there's nothing that can touch us, unless the dead come back to life. And there, underlined in a different hand, a woman's. Someone had written back. They do. At the bottom of the last letter, that same woman's hand had written, "Lost at sea the 4th of June, the same day as..." And it stopped there. I put the letters down, and I made myself stop turning them over in my head because I could feel it pulling at my nerves, and I needed my nerves. I stirred the fire up bright. I opened my book. I read, calm enough, until about 11:30. Then I lay down on the bed, still dressed, and told Frank he could go to his own room, but stay awake and leave the connecting door open. 2 candles burning by my head, my watch on the table next to the gun and the knife, the fire clear and bright, the dog asleep on the hearthrug. I picked the book back up. About 20 minutes in, a stream of freezing air went past my cheek, like a door had opened somewhere. I checked. Both doors shut. Then I looked left and saw the candle flames bent flat sideways, like a wind was hitting them. And at the same moment my watch slid off the table. Softly, all by itself. No hand touching it. Gone. I jumped up and grabbed the gun and the knife. I wasn't about to let my weapons vanish next. I looked all over the floor. The watch was gone. Then 3 slow, loud, deliberate knocks came from the head of the bed. Frank called out from his room. "Is that you, sir?" "No. Stay on guard." The dog woke up, sat up on his haunches, ears flicking back and forth, and fixed his eyes on me with a stare so strange it pulled all my attention onto him. Slowly he stood up. Every hair on his body bristled. He went rigid, locked in that wild stare. I didn't get to watch him long, because Frank came out of his room, and if I've ever seen pure horror on a human face, it was then. I wouldn't have recognized him on the street. Every feature was wrong, twisted. He pushed past me fast, whispering, barely getting the words out. "Run, run. It's after me." He reached the landing door, hauled it open, and bolted. I went after him, calling him to stop, but he didn't even hear me. He threw himself down the stairs, grabbing the banister, taking them 3 and 4 at a time. I heard the street door bang open, bang shut, and I was alone in the house. For about a second I thought about following him. Then pride and curiosity shut that down. I went back into the room, shut the door, and made myself go into the little inner room, the one he'd fled from. Nothing. I checked the walls again for a hidden door. Nothing. Not even a seam in the paper. So how had the thing, whatever had scared him that badly, even gotten to him, except through my room? I went back, locked the connecting door, and stood at the fireplace, ready. That's when I saw the dog had crammed himself into a corner, pressing into the wall like he was trying to force his way through it. I went over and spoke to him. The animal was out of his mind with terror. He bared every tooth, drool hanging off his jaws. He'd have bitten me if I'd touched him. He didn't know me. You've seen an animal cornered by a snake, frozen, cowering. That was my dog. I gave up on him, put my weapons on the table by the fire, sat down, and picked up my book again. Now, before I tell you the rest, let me be straight about how I was thinking, so you don't take me for braver than I am. I've seen a lot of strange things in my life, all over the world, and I've come to believe something simple. There's no such thing as supernatural. There's only nature we don't understand yet. If a ghost stands up in front of me, I don't conclude the impossible just happened. I conclude that ghosts are, apparently, part of nature after all. And we just didn't know it. And here's the other thing I believed, sitting in that room. In every real case of this stuff I'd ever come across, there was always a living person behind it somewhere. A medium. Some human being with a strange gift through whom the effects came. Like hypnotism. One mind reaching out and working on another, even across a distance. So I'd decided, whatever happened in this house tonight, some living human mind was the source of it. Not a devil. Not a soul from beyond. A person, somewhere, with power I didn't understand. That belief was my armor. It kept the pure, superstitious terror off me. I sat there like a scientist waiting on an experiment. A dangerous one, maybe, but an experiment. And I kept my eyes locked on the solid daylight sense in the pages of my book. Then something came between my eyes and the light. The page went dark. I looked up. And I'm going to have trouble describing what I saw, because there aren't really words for it. It was a darkness, shaping itself out of the air, in an outline I couldn't pin down. I can't say it was a human form, but it was more like a human form than anything else, standing apart from the air and the light around it. Huge. The top of it nearly touched the ceiling, and a deep cold hit me. Not fear cold, physical cold, like standing in front of an iceberg. As I stared, I thought I saw two eyes, way up at the top of it, looking down at me. There, then gone. But two pale blue rays kept shooting down out of the dark, from up where I thought the eyes were. I tried to speak. No voice. I could only think, over and over. Is this fear? It is not fear. I tried to stand. Couldn't. Something pressed me down. Some huge, overwhelming force set against my own will, the way the sea or a fire is set against a man. Another will, in the room with me, and stronger than mine the way a storm is stronger than a swimmer. And then, finally, the horror came. Full, more than I can put into words. But I hung on to one thing, said it to myself. This is horror, but it's not fear. If I don't fear it, it can't hurt me. My reason rejects it. It's an illusion. I do not fear. I forced my hand out toward the weapon on the table, and as I did, something hit my arm and shoulder, a strange shock, and the arm dropped, dead, useless to my side. And then the light started to die. Not blown out, drained. The flame gradually pulled out of the candles. Same with the fire. The light sucked right out of the coals. In a couple of minutes, the room was pitch black. Being in the dark with that dark thing, feeling its power fill the room, that broke something loose in me. Terror hit its absolute peak, and either I was going to lose my mind, or I was going to smash through it. I smashed through it. I found my voice. It came out as a scream, but it came. I do not fear. My soul does not fear. And I found the strength to stand. I rushed at a window in the black, tore the curtain back, threw the shutters open. And the first thing I wanted was light. And there was the moon, high and clear and calm, and the gas lamps down in the empty street. And I felt a rush of joy that almost paid for the whole nightmare. I turned back to the room. The moon lit it, pale and partial. The dark thing was gone, except for a dim shadow still on the far wall, like the shadow of that shadow. And then my eyes went to the table, and from under it, a hand rose up, visible to the wrist, flesh and blood seemingly, like mine, but old, lean, wrinkled, small, a woman's hand. It closed softly over the 2 letters lying there, and hand and letters both vanished. Then the 3 loud measured knocks again, and the whole room started to vibrate, and at the far end, rising up out of the floor, came sparks, bubbles of light, colored, green and gold and red and blue, drifting up and down and around, each moving on its own, like little will-o'-the-wisps. A chair pushed out from the wall on its own and stopped at the far side of the table, and out of it a shape grew, a woman's shape, as real as a living person, and as ghastly as a corpse. Young face, a strange mournful beauty, bare throat and shoulders, a loose white robe. She was combing her long yellow hair over her shoulders, and her eyes weren't on me. They were on the door, watching it, waiting. And behind her the dark shadow grew darker, and again I thought I saw the eyes gleaming down from the top of it, fixed on her. Then out of the door, though it never opened, another shape grew, a man, young, dressed in the fashion of 100 years before, all ruffles and lace and buckles, and the elegance of it against his corpse-like face and dead stillness was its own kind of horror. He moved toward the woman, and just as he reached her, the dark shadow leapt out from the wall, and for a second all 3 were swallowed in black. When the pale light came back, the 2 figures were caught in the grip of the shadow that stood between them, and there was a blood stain spreading on the woman's chest, and the man was leaning on a sword, blood running from his lace cuffs, and the darkness swallowed them, and they were gone. The bubbles of light shot around faster, thicker, wilder. Then a closet door by the fireplace opened, and out came an old woman. In her hand, the letters, the very same letters I'd watched that hand take. And behind her, footsteps. She turned as if to listen, then opened the letters and read. And over her shoulder rose a face, the face of a man long drowned, bloated, bleached white, seaweed tangled in his dripping hair. And at her feet lay a corpse, and beside it crouched a child, a starved, filthy, terrified child. And as I watched the old woman's face, the wrinkles smoothed away, and it became young again, hard, cold, stony, but young. And the shadow darted out and swallowed all of them too. Now there was only the shadow. And I fixed my eyes on it, until eyes grew out of it again, snake eyes, and the bubbles of light rose and fell, and out of them, like things hatching, monstrous shapes burst free, swarming, transparent, boneless, hideous, chasing and devouring each other, filling the air. No two the same. No order to how they moved. They came at me, thicker and faster, crawling over my head, my arm, the arm I'd stretched out without meaning to, held up against them, and sometimes I felt myself touched, not by them, by invisible hands. Once, cold, soft fingers closed around my throat, and I knew the whole time that if I gave in to the fear, I'd be in real danger, that it could hurt me, kill me, if I let it. So I put everything I had into one thing, my will. I refused. I dragged my eyes off the shadow in those snake eyes, because that's where it was, not in the swarm, in the eyes. A will, a living will, pouring out evil, trying to crush mine. The air started to redden like a fire was near. The swarming things glowed like they lived in flame. The room shook again. The 3 knocks came again. And then everything, all of it, got swallowed back into the darkness of the shadow, like it had all come out of that darkness, and now it all went back in. The gloom pulled back. The shadow was gone. Slowly the flame grew back into the candles, back into the coals. The room came back, calm, ordinary, whole. Both doors still shut, the connecting door still locked, and in the corner, jammed against the wall, the dog. I called him. Nothing. I went over. He was dead, eyes bulging, tongue out, froth around his jaws. I felt a stab of real grief and guilt. I'd brought him here. I figured he'd died of fright. But when I picked him up, I found his neck was broken. Broken. Had something done that in the dark? A hand as real as mine. Had there been a living body in that room the whole time? I can't tell you. I can only tell you what I found. And my watch was back on the table, but it had stopped at the exact moment it was taken, and it has never run right since. It'll go for a few hours, erratic, then die. It's useless now. Nothing else happened. I didn't have long to wait for dawn, and I didn't leave until it was full daylight. Before I went, I made myself go back into that little blind room one more time, because I had a strong feeling, one I couldn't explain, that that room was the engine of the whole thing. And even in broad day, with sun coming through the dirty window, I felt the same horror creep over me the second I stood on its floor. I couldn't stand to be in there more than 30 seconds. I went downstairs, and I heard the footsteps ahead of me again. And when I opened the street door, I thought I heard, very low, a laugh. Frank never came home. 3 days later, I got a letter from him, sent from Liverpool. Sir, I'm so sorry, and I know I don't deserve to be forgiven, unless you saw what I saw. God forbid. I don't think I'll be right for years. I can't work, not like this. I'm going to my brother-in-law in Australia. The ship leaves tomorrow. Maybe the long voyage will fix me. I do nothing now but flinch and shake and feel it behind me. Please send my things and my wages to my mother's. Maybe he'd just wanted an excuse to run off to Australia. Maybe he was in on it somehow. People will believe that before they'll believe the rest. I don't argue. But I know what I saw, and I never doubted my own theory for a second. Whatever was behind all this, it started in a living human mind. I went to Jarrett and gave back the keys. I started to tell him what happened, but he cut me off, polite but firm. He had no interest anymore in a mystery no one could solve. I told him about the letters anyway, and how they'd vanished. I asked if he thought they'd been written to the woman who died in the house, and whether there was anything in her past that fit the dark thing I'd sensed in them. He went quiet, thinking. I barely know her early history, he said, but you're stirring up some vague, ugly memories. Let me make some inquiries. Then he asked, careful, do you honestly believe the whole thing could be explained? That it's human? I'm convinced, I said, that if you got to the bottom of it, you'd find a living hand behind it. Not a fraud, exactly. Something stranger than that. You know how under hypnosis, one mind can reach into another and make it see, feel, believe things? I think there's a power like that, but stronger, older, the kind of thing people used to call magic. I think somewhere there's a mind, a brain of enormous power. And what we saw in that house was that mind's dreams, its stray, malignant thoughts, given shape and set loose. Not ghosts exactly, not souls, more like echoes. The stamp left behind by the dead, replayed. That's why these things never make sense, never speak with any wisdom, never do anything with a point. They're not intelligence, they're leftovers, a dead form's shadow, driven by a living will. But that will, it killed your dog, Jarrett said. That's real. That's terrifying. It is. And it's strange. No animal will stay in that house. Not even a cat. No mice, no bats. Animals sense what's deadly to them, I said. Our reason is a duller sense, but a stronger shield. Here's what I'd do, if it were mine. That little blind room, I'm certain it's the source, the receiving point for whatever haunts the place. Tear it out. The walls, the floor, all of it. It's built off on its own, over the backyard. You could pull it down without touching the rest of the house. And you think that would end it? You'd be cutting the wire. Try it. I'm so sure I'll pay half the cost myself, if you'll let me run it. About 10 days later, Jarrett wrote to me. He'd gone back to the house. He'd found the 2 letters, back in the drawer I'd taken them from. He'd read them, and they'd disturbed him the same way they'd disturbed me. And he'd looked into the woman. 36 years ago, against her family's wishes, she'd married an American with a bad reputation, widely believed to have been a pirate. She'd been a respectable tradesman's daughter, had worked as a live-in nanny before the marriage. She had a brother, a well-off widower with 1 small child, about 6. A month after the wedding, the brother was found in the Thames near London Bridge. Some marks on his throat, not enough, they decided, for a verdict beyond found drowned. The American and his wife took in the little boy. The dead brother's will had made his sister the child's guardian and left her everything if the child died. 6 months later, the child died, neglected, starved, beaten. The neighbors had heard it screaming at night. The doctor said the body was emaciated and covered in bruises. It seemed the child had tried to escape one winter night, crawled out into the backyard, tried to climb the wall, collapsed, and been found dying on the stones in the morning. Cruelty, yes. Murder they couldn't prove. And at the child's death, the aunt inherited her brother's fortune. Before that first year of marriage was out, the American left England suddenly and never came back. His ship was lost in the Atlantic 2 years later. The widow was left rich, but nothing ever went right for her again. A bank failed. An investment collapsed. A business went under. She sank, job by job, lower and lower, until she ended up in the workhouse. And from there, Jarrett had taken her and put her in charge of the very house she'd once rented as its mistress, in the first year of her marriage. Jarrett had spent an hour alone in that blind little room. He hadn't seen or heard a thing. But the dread was so bad he was now desperate to tear it out. He'd hired workers. We just had to name the day. We named it. I went back to the house with him. We went into that dreary blind room, pulled up the baseboards, then the floor. Under the rafters, buried in rubble, we found a trap door, big enough for a person. Nailed down tight, iron clamps and rivets. We got them off and went down. into a room nobody had known was there. It had once had a window and a chimney, both bricked over years ago. By candlelight we looked around. Some rotting old furniture, 3 chairs, a bench, a table, all about 80 years out of date. A chest of drawers with the half-rotted clothes of a wealthy gentleman from a century back, costly buckles and buttons, a fine sword. In a waistcoat pocket, gone black with damp, we found 5 gold coins, some silver, and a ticket to some long-forgotten show. But the real find was an iron safe set into the wall. It took us a long time to pick the lock. Inside, shelves with small crystal bottles, sealed airtight, colorless liquids, and no, not poisons, strange glass tubes, a pointed iron rod, a lump of rock crystal, a lump of amber, and a very powerful magnet. And in one drawer, a small portrait set in gold, the colors somehow still fresh. A man in his late 40s. And the face, I don't know how to make you see it. Imagine a huge serpent somehow made into a man, keeping the snake underneath the human features, a wide, flat brow, a jaw you could feel the strength of under the elegance, and the eyes, long, huge, green as emerald, glittering, and behind them a cold, terrible calm, the calm of something that knows exactly how much power it has. I turned it over. On the back was a symbol, and inside the symbol a little ladder, and one of the ladder's rungs was made of a date, 1765. I found a hidden catch, pressed it, and the back opened. Inside was engraved, Mariana to thee, be faithful, in life and in death too. And then a name. I won't write it, but I knew it. I'd heard old men say it when I was a boy. The name of a dazzling con man who'd caused a sensation in London for a year or 2, then fled the country, wanted for a double murder in his own house, his mistress, and his rival. There was a second drawer. It wouldn't open, not locked, just stuck, until we forced it with a chisel. Inside, laid out with great care, a small flat book, and on top of it a crystal saucer full of clear liquid, and floating on the liquid, a kind of compass. Its needle was whipping around fast, but instead of the usual compass points, there were 7 strange symbols, like the ones astrologers use for the planets. A faint odor came off the drawer, not unpleasant, but it did something to your nerves. All of us felt it, even the 2 workers. A crawling, tingling sensation running from your fingertips up to your scalp. I reached in to get the little book and lifted the saucer off it. The second I did, the needle spun even faster, and a shock ran through my whole body, and I dropped the saucer. It shattered. The liquid spilled. The compass rolled to the far end of the room, and in that instant the walls shook, hard, side to side, like a giant had grabbed the house and rocked it. The 2 workers scrambled up the ladder in terror. When nothing else happened, we coaxed them back. I opened the little book. Red leather, silver clasp. 1 page inside, thick vellum, and written on it, inside a double ring of symbols, words in old church Latin. Translated, they said, on everything within these walls that this can reach, living or dead, thinking or not, as the needle moves, so my will works. Cursed be the house, and restless be all who live in it. That was all. Jarrett burned the book and its curse. He tore the little room and the hidden chamber below it down to the foundations. And then he had the nerve to move into the house himself for a month, There wasn't a quieter, more peaceful house in all of London. Later he rented it out, no trouble at all. His tenant never had a single complaint. "Hello, below there." When he heard me call, he was standing at the door of his box, a flag rolled up around its short pole in his hand. You'd have thought, given the lay of the land, that he couldn't have doubted where the voice came from. But instead of looking up at me, I was at the top of the steep cutting, almost directly above him. He turned himself around and looked off down the line. There was something strange in the way he did it. I couldn't have told you what, for the life of me, but it was strange enough to catch my attention, even with his figure shortened and shadowed down there in the deep trench, and me high above him, so drowned in the glare of an angry sunset that I'd had to shade my eyes with my hand before I could see him at all. "Hello, below." He turned back from looking down the line, lifted his eyes and saw me high above him. "Is there a path I can come down by to speak to you?" He looked up at me without answering, and I looked down at him without pushing the question too soon. Just then, the ground in the air gave a faint tremble, which quickly built into a violent shudder and an oncoming rush that made me jump back, as though it had the force to pull me down. A train. When the cloud of steam it threw up had risen to my level and gone skimming off across the countryside, I looked down again and saw him rolling his flag back up, the one he'd shown while the train went by. I repeated my question. After a pause, during which he seemed to study me with a fixed kind of attention, he pointed with his rolled-up flag toward a spot on my level, 200 or 300 yards away. I called down, "All right," and headed for it. And there, looking hard, I found a rough zigzag path notched into the slope, and I followed it down. The cutting was extremely deep and unusually steep. It had been dug through a clammy stone that got wetter and slimier the further down I went. So the descent was long enough to give me time to remember the odd air of reluctance or dread, with which he had pointed out the path. When I'd come down far enough on the zigzag to see him again, I saw he was standing between the rails on the track the train had just come down, in a posture like he was waiting for me to appear. His left hand was at his chin, his left elbow resting on his right hand, folded across his chest. He stood so full of expectation and watchfulness that I stopped a moment, wondering at it. I started down again, stepped out onto the level of the track, and got close to him. He was a dark, sallow man, with a dark beard and heavy eyebrows. His post was in the most lonesome, dismal spot I ever saw. On both sides, a dripping wall of jagged stone rose up and blocked out everything but a strip of sky. In one direction, this great crooked dungeon just stretched further away. In the other, shorter direction, it ended at a gloomy red light and the gloomier mouth of a black tunnel, a heavy, barbarous, forbidding piece of architecture. So little sunlight ever reached that place that it had a stale, earthy, deadly smell to it, and so much cold wind rushed through it that it chilled me right through, as if I'd stepped out of the natural world. Before he'd moved, I was near enough to touch him. Even then, still not taking his eyes off mine, he stepped back a step and raised his hand. This was a lonely post to have, I said. It had caught my attention up top. A visitor must be a rarity. Not, I hoped, an unwelcome one. In me, I told him, he was simply seeing a man who'd been shut inside narrow walls his whole life, and who, finally set free, had a fresh interest in these great works of engineering. Something like that is what I said, though I'm honestly not sure of my exact words, because I'm not good at starting conversations, and there was something about the man that unsettled me. He gave a very strange look toward the red light near the tunnel's mouth, and looked all around it, as though something were missing from it. Then he looked at me. That light was part of his job, wasn't it? He answered in a low voice, "Don't you know it is?" A monstrous thought came into my mind as I studied those fixed eyes and that grim face. The thought that this was a ghost, not a man. I've wondered since whether there was something in his mind that had infected mine. Now it was my turn to step back. And in doing it, I caught in his eyes a kind of hidden fear of me. That put the monstrous thought to flight. "You look at me," I said, forcing a smile, "as if you're afraid of me." "I wasn't sure," he answered, "whether I'd seen you before." "Where?" He pointed to the red light he'd been looking at. "There," I said. Watching me intently, he answered, but without any sound, just his lips. "Yes. My good man, what would I be doing there? Anyway, believe me, I've never been there. You can be sure of it." "I think I can," he said. "Yes, I'm sure I can." His manner cleared up, and so did mine. He answered my questions readily, in well-chosen words. Did he have much to do here? Yes. That is, he had a lot of responsibility to carry. But what was required of him was precision and watchfulness. Of actual physical work, there was almost none. Changing that signal, trimming those lights, turning this iron handle now and then, that was the whole of it. About the many long, lonely hours I kept making so much of, all he could say was that his life had shaped itself into that routine, and he'd gotten used to it. He'd taught himself a language down here, if learning to recognize it on sight, and forming his own rough ideas of how it was pronounced, could be called learning it. He'd worked at fractions and decimals too, and tried a little algebra, but he was, and always had been, bad with numbers. Did he have to stay in that channel of damp air the whole time he was on duty? Could he never climb up into the sunshine, out from between those high stone walls? Well, that depended. Under some conditions there was less traffic on the line than others, and the same went for certain hours of the day and night. In good weather he did pick his moments to get a little above the shadows down here, but since he was always liable to be called by his electric bell, and had to listen for it with double the anxiety when he was away from it, the relief was less than I'd think. He took me into his box. There was a fire, a desk with an official logbook he had to make entries in, a telegraph instrument with its dial and needles, and the little bell he'd mentioned. When I said, hoping he'd forgive the remark, that he seemed well educated, maybe educated above this job, he said that you'd find small mismatches like that in any large group of men. He'd heard it was true in workhouses, in the police, even in that last resort refuge, the army. And he knew it was true, more or less, across any big railway staff. He'd been, when he was young, hard as it was to believe, seeing him sitting in that hut, a student. He'd gone to lectures, but he'd run wild, wasted his chances, gone down, and never come back up. He had no complaint about it. He'd made his bed, and he was lying in it. It was far too late to make another. "Everything I've just compressed," he said quietly. his grave, dark gaze moving between me and the fire. Now and then he threw in the word "sir," especially when he spoke about his youth, as if to say he claimed to be nothing more than what I found him now. He was interrupted a few times by the little bell and had to read messages and send answers. Once he had to step outside the door, hold up a flag as a train passed, and call something to the driver. In doing his duties, I noticed he was remarkably precise and alert, breaking off mid-word and staying silent until whatever he had to do was done. In short, I'd have marked this man down as one of the safest people you could put in that job, except for one thing. Twice, while he was talking to me, he broke off, went pale, turned his face toward the little bell when it did not ring, opened the door of the hut, which he kept shut against the sickly damp, and looked out toward the red light near the tunnel's mouth. Both times he came back to the fire with that same unexplainable look I'd noticed from up top without being able to name it. "You almost make me think," I said as I got up to leave, "that I've met a contented man." I'm afraid I have to admit I said it to draw him out. "I believe I used to be one," he answered, in that low voice he'd first spoken in. "But I'm troubled, sir. I'm troubled." He'd have taken the words back if he could. But he'd said them, and I jumped on them. "By what? What's your trouble?" "It's very hard to explain, sir. Very, very hard to speak of. If you ever visit me again, I'll try to tell you. But I fully intend to visit again. Tell me, when?" "I go off early in the morning, and I'll be on again at 10 tomorrow night, sir. I'll come at 11. He thanked me and walked me out the door. "I'll show my white light, sir," he said, in that peculiar low voice, "until you've found the way up. And when you've found it, don't call out. And when you're at the top, don't call out." His manner made the place feel colder to me, but I only said, "All right." "And when you come down tomorrow night, don't call out. Let me ask you a parting question. What made you shout, 'Hello, below there,' tonight?" "God knows," I said. "I shouted something like that." "Not like that, sir. Those were your exact words. I know them well." "Fine. Those were the exact words. I said them, no doubt, because I saw you down below. For no other reason?" "What other reason could I possibly have?" "You didn't feel they were somehow put into you? In some supernatural way?" "No." He wished me good night and held up his light. I walked along beside the down line of rails, with a very unpleasant feeling of a train coming up behind me, until I found the path. It was easier to climb than to go down, and I got back to my inn without any trouble. Right on time the next night, I set my foot on the first notch of the zigzag as distant clocks were striking 11. He was waiting at the bottom, his white light on. "I haven't called out," I said as we came close. "May I speak now?" "By all means, sir." "Good evening, then. Here's my hand." "Good evening, sir. And here's mine." We walked side by side to his box, went in, shut the door, and sat down by the fire. "I've made up my mind, sir," he began, leaning forward the moment we were seated, speaking barely above a whisper. "You won't have to ask me twice what troubles me. Last night I took you for someone else. That's what troubles me. That mistake? No, that's someone else. Who is it? I don't know. Someone who looks like me? I don't know. I've never seen the face. The left arm is across the face, and the right arm waves, violently waves, like this." I followed his gesture with my eyes. It was the motion of an arm waving with the utmost passion and force, the gesture for God's sake, clear the way. One moonlit night, the man said, I was sitting here when I heard a voice shout, "Hello, below there." I jumped up, looked out that door, and saw this someone else standing by the red light near the tunnel, waving the way I just showed you. The voice was hoarse, like it had been shouting a long time, and it cried, "Look out, look out." And then again, "Hello, below there, look out." I grabbed my lamp, turned it to red, and ran toward the figure shouting, "What's wrong? What happened? Where?" It was standing just outside the blackness of the tunnel. I got so close to it that I couldn't understand why it kept the sleeve across its eyes. I ran right up to it and put my hand out to pull the sleeve away, and it was gone. "Into the tunnel?" I said. "No. I ran into the tunnel myself, 500 yards. I stopped, held my lamp above my head, and saw the numbers marking the distance, and the wet stains crawling down the walls and dripping through the arch. I ran out again faster than I'd gone in. I had a mortal horror of the place by then, and I searched all around the red light with my own red lamp, and I climbed the iron ladder up to the platform on top of it, and came back down, and ran back here. I telegraphed both directions. An alarm's been raised. Is anything wrong? The answer came back, both ways. All well. Resisting the slow touch of a cold finger tracing down my spine, I explained to him that the figure had to be a trick of his eyesight, that images caused by disease in the delicate nerves of the eye were known to trouble patients, some of whom had come to understand their condition, had even proved it with experiments on themselves. And as for an imaginary shout, I said, just listen a moment to the wind in this unnatural valley, while we're speaking so low. Listen to the wild harp it makes of the telegraph wires. That was all fine, he answered, after we'd sat and listened a while. And he'd know something about the wind and the wires, wouldn't he? Having spent so many long winter nights here, alone, listening. But he'd like to point out that he hadn't finished. I apologized, and he slowly added these words, touching my arm. Within 6 hours of the appearance, the terrible accident on this line happened, and within 10 hours, the dead and the injured were carried through the tunnel, over the very spot where the figure had stood. An unpleasant shudder went through me, but I fought it down. It couldn't be denied, I said, that this was a striking coincidence, enough to press hard on his mind. But it was also unquestionable that striking coincidences happen all the time, and had to be accounted for in thinking about a thing like this. Though I admitted, because I could see he was about to turn the point against me. Men of common sense don't allow much for coincidence in the ordinary business of life. He begged to remark again that he hadn't finished. Again I apologized for interrupting. "This," he said, laying his hand on my arm once more and glancing over his shoulder with hollow eyes, "was just a year ago. 6 or 7 months went by, and I'd recovered from the shock, when one morning, as day was breaking, I was standing at the door, and I looked toward the red light, and saw the ghost again." He stopped, with a fixed look at me. Did it shout? No. It was silent. Did it wave its arm? No. It leaned against the shaft of the light, with both hands over its face, like this. Once more I followed his gesture. It was a gesture of mourning. I've seen that pose on stone figures on tombs. Did you go up to it? I came inside and sat down, partly to get my thoughts together, partly because it had made me faint. When I went to the door again, it was full daylight, and the ghost was gone. But nothing followed? Nothing came of it? He touched me on the arm with his fingertip 2 or 3 times, giving a ghastly nod each time. That very day, as a train came out of the tunnel, I noticed at a carriage window, on my side, what looked like a confusion of hands and heads, and something waving. I saw it just in time to signal the driver. Stop. He cut the power and put on the brake, but the train drifted past here, 150 yards or more. I ran after it, and as I went I heard terrible screaming and crying. A beautiful young woman had died, all at once, in one of the compartments. They brought her in here, and laid her down on this floor, between the two of us. Without meaning to, I pushed my chair back, looking from the floorboards he pointed at to him. True, sir. True. Exactly as it happened. That's how I'm telling it. I couldn't think of a single useful thing to say, and my mouth was very dry. The wind and the wires took up the story with a long, wailing lament. He went on. Now, sir, mark this, and understand how my mind is troubled. The ghost came back a week ago. Ever since, it's been there, off and on, in fits and starts. At the light? At the danger light. What does it seem to do? He repeated, if anything with even more passion and force, that same gesture. For God's sake, clear the way. Then he went on. I get no peace, no rest from it. It calls to me for minutes at a time in an agonized way. Below there, look out, look out. It stands there waving at me. It rings my little bell. I caught at that. Did it ring your bell last night, when I was here, and you went to the door? Twice. See, I said, how your imagination is fooling you. My eyes were on the bell, my ears were open for the bell, and, as sure as I'm a living man, it did not ring at either of those times. Not then, nor at any other time, except when it was rung the ordinary way, by the station down the line signaling to you. He shook his head. I've never once made a mistake about that, sir. I've never confused the ghost's ring with a man's. The ghost's ring is a strange vibration in the bell that comes from nothing else, and I never claimed you'd be able to see the bell move. I don't wonder you didn't hear it, but I heard it. And did the ghost seem to be there when you looked out? It was there. Both times? He said firmly. Both times. Will you come to the door with me now and look for it? He bit his lower lip, like he was somewhat unwilling, but he stood up. I opened the door and stood on the step, while he stood in the doorway. There was the danger light. There was the dismal mouth of the tunnel. There were the high, wet stone walls of the cutting. There were the stars above them. Do you see it? I asked him, watching his face closely. His eyes were prominent and strained, but maybe not much more than my own had been when I'd aimed them earnestly at the same spot. No, he answered. It isn't there. Agreed, I said. We went back in, shut the door, and sat down again. I was thinking how best to press this small advantage, if you could call it one, when he took the conversation back up in such a matter-of-fact way, so completely assuming there could be no real question of the facts between us, that I felt myself put in the weakest possible position. By now, sir, he said, you fully understand that what troubles me so terribly is this question. What does the ghost mean? I told him I wasn't sure I did fully understand. "What is its warning against?" he said, brooding, his eyes on the fire, only now and then turning them on me. "What is the danger? Where is the danger? There's danger hanging over the line somewhere. Some dreadful disaster is going to happen. There's no doubting it, this third time, after everything that's already come before. But God, what a cruel haunting this is. What can I do?" He pulled out his handkerchief and wiped the sweat off his burning forehead. "If I telegraph danger, one direction or the other or both, I can give no reason for it," he went on, wiping his palms. "I'd get in trouble and do no good. They'd think I was insane. Here's how it would go. Message: danger, take care. Answer: what danger? Where? Message: I don't know, but for God's sake, take care. They'd fire me. What else could they do?" His mental pain was pitiable to watch. It was the torture of a conscientious man, crushed past his limit by a responsibility he couldn't understand, one with lives hanging on it. When it first stood under the danger light, he went on, pushing his dark hair back, dragging his hands over and over across his temples in an extreme of feverish distress. Why not tell me where the accident would happen, if it had to happen? Why not tell me how it could be stopped, if it could have been stopped? When it came the second time and hit its face, why not tell me instead, "She's going to die. Let them keep her at home"? If it came those 2 times only to prove its warnings were real, and get me ready for the third, then why not warn me plainly now? And me, Lord help me, a poor signalman on this lonely station, why not go to somebody who'd be believed, somebody with the power to actually do something? Seeing him in this state, I understood that, for the poor man's sake and for public safety both, what I had to do right then was calm his mind. So, setting aside every question of what was real and what wasn't, I put it to him that whoever fully does his duty does well, and that at least it was his comfort that he understood his duty, even if he didn't understand these baffling appearances. This worked far better than my attempt to reason him out of what he believed. He grew calm. As the night went on, the tasks of his post started to demand more of his attention, and I left him at 2 a.m. I'd offered to stay the night, but he wouldn't hear of it. That I looked back at the red light more than once as I climbed the path. That I didn't like the red light. That I'd have slept badly if my bed had been beneath it. I see no reason to hide. And I didn't like the 2 chains of events either. The accident and the dead girl. I see no reason to hide that either. But what ran hardest through my mind was this. What should I do, now that I'd been handed this? I'd found the man intelligent, watchful, careful, precise. But how long would he stay that way, in his state of mind? He was in a junior position, yes, but he still held a hugely important trust. Would I, for one, want to bet my own life on his continuing to carry it out exactly right? I couldn't shake the feeling that there'd be something treacherous in reporting what he'd told me to his bosses in the company, without first being straight with him and offering him a middle path. So I finally decided I'd offer to take him, otherwise keeping his secret for now, to the wisest doctor we could find in those parts, and get an opinion. His hours changed the next night, he'd told me. He'd be off an hour or 2 after sunrise, and back on soon after sunset. I'd arranged to come back then. The next evening was lovely, and I went out early to enjoy it. The sun wasn't quite down when I crossed the field path near the top of the deep cutting. I'll stretch my walk another hour, I told myself. Half an hour out, half an hour back. And then it'll be time to go down to the signalman's box. Before I went on, I stepped to the edge and, without thinking, looked down from the same spot where I'd first seen him. I can't describe the horror that seized me when, right at the mouth of the tunnel, I saw the figure of a man, his left sleeve across his eyes, passionately waving his right arm. The nameless dread that gripped me passed in a moment, because in that moment I saw that this figure of a man was a real man, and that a little group of other men stood a short distance off, and he seemed to be showing them the gesture he was making. The danger light wasn't lit yet. Against its post, a little low hut had been built, one I'd never seen before, out of some wooden supports and a tarpaulin. It looked no bigger than a bed, with an overwhelming sense that something was wrong, with a flashing, self-accusing fear that some deadly harm had come of my leaving that man there and sending no one to watch over him. I went down the notched path as fast as I could go. "What's the matter?" I asked the men. "Signalman was killed this morning, sir." "Not the man from that box?" "Yes, sir." "Not the man I know?" "You'll recognize him, sir, if you knew him," said the one speaking for the others, solemnly taking off his hat and lifting one end of the tarpaulin, because his face is quite calm. "Oh, how did this happen? How did it happen?" I asked, turning from one to another as the hut was covered again. "He was cut down by an engine, sir. No man in England knew his job better. But somehow he wasn't clear of the outer rail. It was broad daylight. He'd lit the light and had the lamp in his hand. As the engine came out of the tunnel, his back was to it, and it cut him down. That man there was driving it, and was showing us how it happened. Show the gentleman, Tom." The man, in rough, dark clothes, stepped back to his spot at the mouth of the tunnel. "Coming around the curve in the tunnel, sir," he said. "I saw him at the far end, like I was looking at him down the wrong end of a telescope. There was no time to slow down, and I knew he was a careful man. But he didn't seem to take any notice of the whistle, so I shut it off as we bore down on him, and I called to him as loud as I could call." "What did you say?" "I said, 'Below there. Look out. Look out. For God's sake, clear the way.' I started. Ah, it was a dreadful moment, sir. I never stopped calling to him. I put this arm in front of my eyes so I wouldn't see, and I waved this arm to the very last. But it was no use." I'll close here without dragging the story out, without lingering on any one of its strange details over the rest. But let me point out the coincidence. The engine driver's warning included not only the exact words the poor signalman had told me were haunting him, but also the words that I myself, and only in my own mind, had attached to the gesture he'd imitated.